Take a look in my game face. Ain't no stopping me, you know I'm coming in first place. Well, stop it till I get that ring. I'ma dominate all day. No matter who you bring, I will not lose. Yeah. I will not lose. I will not lose.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 9 of MMA Full Throttle with Throttle. I'm your host, Throttle. Really excited to finally break down UFC 300 for you all. It's been a little while since the last episode. But yeah, this is something that's been on everyone's minds, I think. I know we haven't had any super exciting fight nights or pay-per-view cards, to kind of follow up UFC 300. So I think a lot of us have still been digesting or searching for that content, rewatching the highlights of all the fights. I know I've rewatched those things, hundreds of times for sure. Not to get ahead of myself, I want to make sure I'm go fight by fight. So, but yeah, obviously Alex Pereira with a knockout to retain his light heavyweight belt over Jamal Hill was incredible. Max Holloway's last second, meet me in the middle, 10 toes down, standing on business. KO 459 of the 5th round against Justin Gaethje. Incredible. Zhang Weili defended her belt against fellow Chinese countrywoman Yan Xiaonan. So really exciting card, really exciting main event and main card. But man, this is a card that we, going into it on paper, everyone was wondering, is this the greatest card on paper of all time, first of all, and will it live up to that hype and be the greatest card of all time? So for me personally, on paper going into it, I was like, yeah, hell yeah, it's the best card on paper. I mean, not even close. And again, I had some people, on social media. Throttle MMA is where you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram, as well as subscribe to Throttle MMA here on YouTube. But yeah, I was, seeing people say, what about UFC 100 and 200? And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be like too recency biased with the UFC 300 and not give credit to those older events, because I'm definitely somebody that pays respects to past fighters or past athletes in any sport, for that matter. I mean, again, to act like if you're comparing eras that you would just like teleport, in basketball terminology, like teleport Kyrie Irving to go play against Bob Cousy in basketball, and that's how it would work. Like, no, that's not how it would work. It's either they are born at the same time in the old days, or they're born at the same time in the modern times, and then they are raised, under the same coaching and conditions and circumstances and things like that. Then you decide, like, okay, who would be better, and that has to be the context. So anyway, that's the same thing with MMA. A lot of those guys, when back in the day when it was rough and tough and maybe not as technical, they did what they had to do at that time, right? That's how it was. So I think now, again, I want to give credit to those guys, not dismiss those cards. But, and I will take a look at those cards at some point one day probably, just to kind of give credit to them. But no, the UFC 300 on paper, just still to me, again, there's no card ever that had this many former or current champions. No card on paper that had this many just like superstars. Again, I think there's some level of this card on paper is better because the UFC is better now, right? The UFC is more popular and these fighters have been built in better ways. There are definitely superstars on those older cards, but man, superstar galore. Kayla Harrison debut coming from PFL, former 2-time judo Olympic gold medalist, taking on Holly Holm, former UFC champion. I mean, you name it, this card had it all. So did it live up to the hype? Yes, absolutely. And that's because every fight was good. I mean, even the boring, quote-unquote boring fights where maybe, Aljamain Sterling out-grappling Calvin Kattar was boring to some people. It was dominant by Aljamain. It was a game plan that was well executed by Aljamain. And just, again, you saw this former champion, arguably the greatest bantamweight champion ever, going up a weight class against a legitimate contender in that weight class and doing what he wanted, like handling him, receiving no damage, completely shutting down Calvin Kattar, who is a striker, yes, but like it's not like he doesn't know how to grapple. So, good matchup for Aljo in some ways, but he looked like the stronger guy in that cage, the bigger, more muscular guy, not taller, but bigger, more muscular. And he looked like the guy that just was the former champion. And again, at the end of the day, you can say what you want about Aljo, but going into that fight, that's kind of what I was expecting. I was expecting this guy, Aljamain has proven to be a championship level fighter multiple times, multiple defenses of his belt, multiple title appearances in the in the bantamweight division, just doing work in that division. Only a couple losses to knockout artists who caught him, you know what I mean? Sugar Sean O'Malley and then Marvelous Marvin, Marlon Moraes back in the day. So yeah, it's one of those things where this is kind of how it should have been. There are levels to this sport, and Aljamain showed those levels. So I know again I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm not looking at the fight specifically one by one, but that was the quote unquote the most boring fight of the night. And it was, again, if you're a fan of MMA, if you're a fan of grappling, if you're a fan of learning about the sport, I mean, pay attention to what he's doing. It's not like they're not just rolling around doing random stuff. Like Aljamain's grabbing certain limbs to kind of hold on to positions, or moving his body to kind of get closer, taking the back. They're all strategic and high level technical things that these guys are doing. So yeah, just to say that, to me, this card was great. I think it exceeded expectations because the expectations were so high, and every fight was entertaining. And then the main event and the main card just had these just iconic moments in MMA. I mean, literally two of the coolest moments in the history of MMA happened on the main card, with Max Holloway pointing to the center and knocking out Justin Gaethje with 1 second left in the fight, and then Alex Pereira just knocking out Jamal Hill. Eyes rolling back in the head. He emotes on him with the Kabi baby, like, what is this? This is too easy, kind of that, like, just putting his hands out, you name it. I mean, again, two of the coolest moments ever. And again, I forgot to even mention the coolest part about Alex Pereira's knockout was him getting kicked in the dick and then telling Herb Dean, no, not right now. Go away. Like, don't stop this fight right now because I'm fine. I'm about to knock this dude out. And he was. And again, I'll break that down a little bit, further into this episode. But without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to look at, each fight. Look at the stats here. I use I use ESPN, their fight center here. You can see UFC 300 Pereira versus Hill. I've talked about this on other episodes. But you can go here, pick different fight cards from the year. So I'm going to do Pereira versus Hill. Obviously, you can go different years. So yeah, I could go back to UFC 100, 200, even on the fight center and break it down. Maybe I'll do that on a different episode. But anyway, to keep it more focused here, again, first early prelim of the night on this card was former flyweight champion Deiveson Figueiredo, making his second appearance here at bantamweight to fight Cody Garbrandt. So moving up a weight class. Deiveson Figueiredo beat Rob Font in his debut. So kind of fighting Cody is fighting a little bit backwards, but it's a high profile fight, big name in Cody. And you see here, I'm a little bit hesitant to show some highlights just because I don't want these videos to get kind of demonetized, even though I'm not, the subscription, number isn't super high right now. But just to say, I'll break it down quickly here. The highlights are available on ESPN, on this, on their fight center, or you can check it out on YouTube as well. But yeah, Deiveson Figueiredo, Cody Garbrandt. I mean, again, really entertaining to start. Kind of these guys are both known for being very fast, super fast hands, very powerful hands. Cody's chin, has been questioned obviously over the years with his knockouts and things of that nature. Looking at the stats here, I mean, total strikes, Figgy, a few more total strikes, a few less significant strikes. More to the head though, and more accurate to the head. But again, this has to do with his grappling. You see that the control time, 3 minutes and 43 seconds of a fight that didn't even go a full 2 rounds. Had 1 takedown out of 5 attempts, 2 submission attempts, ends up getting the rear naked choke to submit him. Basically, on the feet, first round, I think Figgy was a little bit, more concerned with Cody's power and Cody's speed. Cody looked pretty good in the first round. But Figgy was competitive, and it was the type of thing where you could see the glimpses of Figgy's grappling that could give Cody some trouble. Cody has a wrestling background. But listen, when guys come from straight wrestling backgrounds, American wrestling backgrounds, and come to MMA, if they don't find a way to mix the martial arts, as people like to say, then it's not really a big asset. I mean, American, collegiate wrestlers, if they're not chain wrestling into different levels of control, you can control somebody by putting them on their back and being on top of them. But you can control them against the cage, in the clinch. There's different levels of grappling, or different kind of ways to transition between grappling techniques that you don't really see these guys have a lot. So, Figgy was always a big flyweight. Cody's, never been a huge bantamweight. So I think Cody did look bigger in this fight, but Figgy looked very strong. And he just realized that first round, Cody's kind of got some confidence on the feet. The danger is here, and I have an advantage on the ground that I can just do what I want. So that's what Figgy did here. Took Cody down. It was, there was some good scrambles happening. Cody is still very athletic, but ultimately Figgy ends up getting the rear naked choke. And again, I think that might be the highest level fight, or the biggest name that Cody gets for the foreseeable future. I mean, he was already kind of working his way back up slowly in that division. And Figgy's he's a I think he's a probably top 10 ranked guy in that division now, but Cody's gonna have to knock out the next guy he fights, and or something like that to kind of elevate him up to have a chance of going against these top five guys. And I really don't see that happening. So, respect to Cody for what he's done in MMA, but that title run to now, it's been a big fall for him for sure. So, anyway, moving on, next fight, Bobby Green, Jim Miller. Jim Miller got the most fights in UFC history. I think he's got like 40 fights or something like that. He fought on UFC 100, 200, and 300 actually, Jim Miller. So this was really exciting. He's a fan favorite, Jim fucking Miller is one of his nicknames, and he's got I think the second most finishes and submissions ever behind Charles Oliveira. He's been in exciting fights. Jim has never really been the highest level fighter in the sense that has he fought top five guys throughout his career? Not really. I mean, maybe back in the day when he was younger, he had an opportunity of something like that. But ultimately now it's like he gets in exciting fights with veterans and, up and comers and things of that nature. He has been streaking a little bit, and, again, the buzz and just the respect for Jim Miller and his toughness, which was on full display in this fight, has kind of got him to that point where, let's get him on UFC 300. So that was a great booking there. Bobby King Green, super exciting fighter. You look at this and it's like, significant strikes, 186 to 57. 136 to the head to 29. That's how it was. Like, Bobby was like volume striking, putting damage on Jim Miller, busted his eye up, lots of blood. And again, Jim had a couple moments where he like almost knocked down Bobby, or almost seemed to wobble Bobby, and you thought, hey, maybe Bobby's a little bit chinny after that late stoppage against Jalen Turner, and now Jim can get the win. Didn't happen. Honestly, the athleticism, the speed advantage for Bobby was just too much. We do see the scores here, 29-27 on one judge's card, which means that they gave Jim one round, and the others they're all 10-9 rounds. There's a 30-25 on one card, which means they gave Bobby 3 rounds, and they gave 2 of those rounds 10-8s. So they said he really, really was whooping on Jim. And then we see 29-26, which again means that Jim won one round and that he lost one of his rounds that he lost 10-8. So, Jim almost got stopped, almost got finished at the end of this fight. Just showed total grit to survive, basically. He was getting brutalized. But yeah, big win for Bobby. Really good to see him back in the win column. Again, Bobby's never really been top 5 necessarily level either, but he's definitely been more consistently top 10 recently and top 15 recently than Jim Miller. So the levels showed here as well. And the next fight we have Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. Good fight. We see a split decision here, 29-28, 29-28, 28-29. Jessica Andrade gets the nod here. I'm not mad at it, honestly. Look at the strikes. You see that Marina was getting, off to the head. 70 strikes to the head versus 35 for Jessica Andrade. But again, the height disadvantage for Andrade makes sense. She had 40 strikes to the legs of Marina, 14 to the body. So she was, doing work to the legs, trying to kind of close that distance to get to the head. But you see she also threw 100 less strikes to the head. So it's really not that crazy in terms of the percentage, just the volume. And then we see the control time, almost 4 minutes of control in a 3-round fight for Andrade. Got a takedown, landed, again, overall 30 more total strikes, and 7 more significant. So the stats kind of show, I think, what the judges saw, which is a split decision, a close fight. In reality, Marina just had moments where Andrade was putting the pressure on her heavily, and Marina was like trying to avoid it and evade. But I think sometimes when you're doing that and you're against the cage and you're not really like getting away from the person, it can look like you're in danger. And I think Marina was like throwing, shots back, throwing pot shots, like kind of just in between dodging. She was throwing strikes and had some success and like looked like she was still in the fight. But it also sometimes looked like her body language was wilting. I'll use that term. Like it looks like she was kind of crumbling under the pressure a little bit. Andrade looked more aggressive, like she was in control of like how the fight was going. And Marina was kind of at her. She had to follow the lead that Andrade was showing her. So it wasn't really something where it seemed like Marina could get out of that situation. Maybe she could maintain fighting that way for the whole fight, and land some strikes and avoid getting hit really, really hard at times. But, I just feel like that's not the best look for the judges, right? So close fight, split decision. I think the right woman won here. So we'll see what's next for Andrade, former champion there at strawweight. Jalen Turner, I mentioned, he knocked out Bobby Green recently in a very late stoppage. He's also on this card. Fought Renato Moicano. Bizarre fight, man. I mean, ultimately, like Jalen Turner, they're saying, hey, he thought he had a $300,000 bonus, like Dana White was saying they would all get, and that's why this happened the way it did. And he just kind of thought he'd have a walk-off KO or something. But basically, first round, he drops Money Moicano, who's very funny and great on the mic, and he did more of that in this fight or after this fight as well. But yeah, I mean, it was a close fight in the first round, competitive. Moicano looked like he was trying to impose his grappling a little bit more against a very tall and rangy striker, but he was landing some strikes too. It was a competitive, striking battle. I think Turner looked a little bit more comfortable, and that showed. He got the knockdown. It's weird because Moicano went to his back immediately, or he fell on his back immediately. But at the same time, he's a jiu-jitsu guy, and lots of jiu-jitsu guys, when they get knocked down, will just go to that guard and be like, "All right, come in here and try to knock me out. I'm gonna try to, submit you or use my jiu-jitsu to scare you." I think that's fair to say that like Moicano's jiu-jitsu is good enough that Turner might have been like, a little bit like, I don't know if I want to go down there. But honestly, to me, the way I took it was like he knocked him down. Moicano falls on his back. Clean knockdown, right? Definitely hurt Moicano on that punch. And Turner's coming off of this very brutal late stoppage where he's having to punch Bobby Green endlessly, it seems like, after he drops Bobby multiple times, after he wobbles him. And literally Bobby is out multiple times, getting knocked back awake, basically, by Jalen Turner. To me, I think Jalen was traumatized by that and the hurt and the damage he was inflicting on somebody, and possibly like ending or shortening somebody's career because the ref won't stop the fight and you need to do your job. I mean, I get it. So for me, I think Jalen Turner had a little bit of PTSD from that and didn't want to follow up to the ground. I think I see some people out there making fun of him, being like, "Oh, he thought he had this walk-off viral KO and was going to get $300,000 bonus." I think it was way more of like in his mind, in the back of his mind, that trauma from the Bobby Green stoppage. So Moicano ends up getting up. Turner's like kind of complaining to the ref, like, "Oh, he's done," pointing at Moicano. And again, to me, it's just all PTSD reactions of like, this guy's done. Look at his eyes, like things he was seeing maybe from Bobby Green. Again, I have not actually heard anything about Jalen Turner's, thoughts or comments after this fight to know whether or not he admitted that, I was having some of those flashbacks of hurting a guy more than I needed to. I'm not sure. It's definitely possible there was other things involved, like, again, Moicano's grappling. But ultimately, Moicano gets up, or Moicano, yes, Moicano. Renato Moicano gets up off his back, gets up, slowly, but Jalen Turner was also like walking away, and I think Moicano was kind of just like, "All right, dude, like I'm hurt, but if you're gonna give me this time to get up slowly and not rush, like I'll do that." So yeah, I don't know if Moicano was like about to get knocked out from that, like, knocked out cold, I should say. I don't think he was quite to that point hurt. But I do think that if Turner followed up right away, he could have got him out of there. So unfortunately, Moicano gets up. Turner doesn't finish the fight. That round, continues. Second round, Moicano ends up, again, he's striking a little bit, but he's mostly trying to impose the grappling. Gets Turner in some tough positions, but Turner is also having some success in that second round as well. But then Moicano ends up getting Turner. He ends up mounting him, and then kind of like maybe he landed an elbow or something. It wasn't really clear like what strike might have hurt Turner, but he seemed to be in a position where, I don't know. Again, you never know what's going on with the guy. You never know if he got hit in a certain way that you couldn't really tell that really hurt him. But it did seem like it was more of like a frustration kind of stoppage where Moicano is hitting him, yes, doing some damage, yes, but he's mostly just controlling him in a way that was really frustrating, and Turner probably felt he couldn't get out of. So yeah, that's my interpretation. Again, I don't want to like again, I don't want to disrespect Turner by saying that, but in my view, he was just kind of, he was kind of done. It was kind of done. Maybe mentally he was done, physically not as much, but that's how it looked. Anyways, next fight here, Sodiq Yusuff versus Diego Lopez. Man, Diego Lopez is a killer at featherweight. He's famous. I should say he got his first kind of shine in the spotlight when he fought Mosar Evelev, who's a contender at featherweight right now on short notice, and was a really competitive fight. He's a good grappler, knockout artist. Diego Lopez has a lot of quick finishes recently in his UFC career. And Sodiq Yusuff, man, he was popping Sodiq. He hit him with some uppercuts. He hit him with some hard stuff that really, really just ended the fight right away. I mean, look, a minute 29 into the first round, he gets the win. And again, he hit him with a one vicious uppercut that dropped him. You see, he has 2 knockdowns. They were both from those uppercuts. Holding him in the clinch and just grabbing the back of his head and kind of just weaving that uppercut within the guard of Sadiq. And Sadiq is no joke, man. Sadiq is a killer. Again, I think he's like that top 15, top 10 fringe guy. And I don't mean fringe top 15. I mean fringe top 10. But he's definitely a solid top 15 guy, pretty solid top 10 guy even. And at times seems like he was on his way to being higher ranked. Has bangers, was beaten up at Edson Barbosa in the first round of their fight before ended up losing that fight. But man, Sadiq is no joke. That's my point. He only landed 2 strikes, couldn't even really throw him in. He only threw 5, and that was probably within the chaos of getting stopped by Diego. But yeah, Diego is no joke. He's really big for the featherweight division. I think he's like 5'9" or 5'10", but he's very muscular. You can see he's, in this picture even, Sadiq is muscular, but he's a shorter guy. To be the height of Diego Lopez, to carry the power he carries, to carry the musculature he carries, he's someone that's coming. I think people are excited to see whether or not he can challenge guys like Sugar Sean O'Malley or challenge guys like, I'll throw Corey Sandhagen in there. I mean, again, I don't know if anyone's calling for that fight next. Corey's going to be fighting, Umar Nurmagomedov most likely next. But the whole idea is just that Diego fighting some of these top guys, the image of that, or like the curiosity for those fights is now really there. I mean, I think people think that this guy could be a contender pretty soon. So shout out to Diego Lopez, great knockout. Not much more to say about it. I mean, he just landed a couple clean uppercuts and then finished the job. Relentless fighter, cool haircut as well. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison, this fight, honestly, this is one that I got pretty wrong even for weeks. And even when this fight was announced, I was like, honestly, I think that Holly's got it. For me, it was like I'd seen Kayla get beat by a striker who was not strong grappler per se, but someone that was a strong person who had some grappling skills that beat her, right? And that's how she had her one loss. And Holly is somebody that early in her career, very minimal grappling technique or skills, always been a strong-bodied person. And recently we've seen her impose that strong body and use the grappling against some ladies. I mean, she's used, holding ladies in the clinch up against the fence, dirty boxing. She's done that. She's tossed women, wrestling style, judo style on the ground and won that way even recently. So it seems like her game was evolving. She's always been a strong, big bantamweight. She's fought at featherweight as well. So it's one of those things where I thought, you know what? She's going to have the height advantage on Kayla. Just keep that distance right. Use the kicks. Don't let Kayla get, her hands on you, basically. And when she does, throw her off of you as soon as you can and don't engage, really. And she could get the win. I thought Holly was going to get the win. Again, Kayla, part of that also had to do with this being her debut at bantamweight. She's only ever fought at featherweight and above, so 145 to 155. This is 135. So it was one of those situations where, watching the fights, it's like, or going into the fight, you're like, I don't know if Kayla's going to even be looking so healthy right on the scales. Like, making that weight is going to be hard for her. Is this something that I believe she can overcome in terms of, and to stay strong and strong enough to go against another chiseled, very physical woman in Holly Holm? I just thought, and Kayla's odds were like, she was, minus 300, minus 500, maybe something like that. And I'm like, no way. I mean, she lost to a striker already. She proved that, if someone can keep her at bay and do some damage and avoid some of those wrestling or those grappling situations, they can beat her, right? So that's what I thought was going to happen. Honestly, like, we'll never know, right? It's one of those things that's over. They're never going to rematch, Holly and Kayla. But Holly even admitted after the fight, like, she blew it. I mean, she engaged with judo clinches with Kayla. They got close to each other in the first round. Holly's grabbing her, and she's the one trying to get a takedown. And it's like, Holly, what are you doing? I mean, again, even if you could do that, like, you have such an advantage. You're a world-class former UFC champion, but also a former kickboxing and boxing world champion. You have such an advantage in striking. And if you can use your movement, which Holly's very good at, right? She's very good with the footwork, very good at staying at distance, staying at range. You can stay at range, point fight a little bit. Again, when you need to use your strength, you use it to get out of those situations. But it was the complete opposite, right? Holly initiates the first kind of clinch in the first round. And Kayla, again, she cut the weight well. She was looking strong in that cage. I think she was like 160. She said she blew back up to like 160 after hydration and everything in the cage. So she was the bigger, stronger woman in that cage. And Holly paid the price. I mean, initiating that with a two-time Olympic gold medalist in judo. Holly got tossed. It's not even that Holly couldn't, like, again, I've seen Holly toss other girls that aren't judo world champions or judo Olympic gold medalists, but Kayla is not the one to do that with. Kayla ends up kind of controlling her on the ground, landing some strikes. I mean, you see here, 68 total strikes to 7, 51 significant to 2. I mean, 4 minutes and 51 seconds of control in a fight that lasted, not even 7 minutes. There you go, right? Like Holly played right into Kayla's hand, did exactly what Kayla would have wanted her to, and then Kayla ends up getting the rear naked choke in the second round after, again, another situation where Holly is fine to engage in the grappling and even initiating it, or even kind of being, staying in it longer than she should. And Kayla tosses her and then beats her up a little bit on the ground and chokes her out. So disappointed because I'm a big Holly Holm fan. Disappointed because I thought this fight could be more competitive, and I thought Holly definitely had another shot. She's beaten the current bantamweight champion Raquel Pennington twice in her career, I believe. She has another shot getting the belt, right? If she beats Kayla Harrison, she probably would be next in line for that belt after Juliana Pena will probably fight Raquel Pennington next. But anyway, man, Kayla looks good. This makes me more excited to see Kayla fight Juliana Pena or Raquel Pennington, whoever wins that fight. But at the same time, again, I'm very disappointed in Holly. Holly said afterwards she did everything wrong. She completely had, just brain fart, whatever you want to call it, just like lapse in judgment, goes in there. Everything she prepared for, everything she planned on doing just goes out the window, and she just tries to initiate grappling with a really great grappler and loses. So I think Holly, I'm sure, has been beating herself up about that for a while now. I can't sit here and say if she followed her game plan, she would have won. Again, I cannot say that after what happened, but I would have liked to see the fight play out that way. Like to see Kayla battle some adversity. Ultimately, maybe this fight worked out for the best, though, because Kayla was unscathed. She came out feeling very confident. She cut a nice promo at the end of it, talking about she's coming. She didn't even mention Amanda Nunes because Amanda Nunes has been retired. But Amanda Nunes posted a video on her social media, kind of doing a selfie video, watching Kayla's speech, being like, pointing to her ear, being like, I don't hear my name. You're not calling my name. But hey, now that division that looked like it was going to be trash and super boring after Amanda Nunes left, Raquel Pennington beats Manuel Bueno Silva. Sorry, I said her name wrong, definitely. But she gets the belt in a very lackluster fight. And Juliana Pena, who was the one woman who beat Amanda Nunes recently at bantamweight, who upset her for one of the greatest upsets of all time to get the belt, had a very not super competitive, I should say. I don't know what the right word is for their rematch. I mean, Juliana Pena versus Amanda Nunes 2. Amanda won that fight like very clearly, but at the end of that fight, both ladies looked beat up because Juliana Pena can really take the punishment, and she took it and she dished out what she could. She stayed relentless against Amanda, but she was the one that clearly was getting beat up more in that fight. So, but that whole idea of a trilogy between those two was maybe the only thing that was keeping that division with any excitement or any buzz. And Juliana Pena was one that was really pushing that too, because she's talking so much trash to Amanda that Amanda starts to kind of show more personality and talk trash back, things like that. But once Amanda retired, it was like, all right, well, now whenever Juliana comes back, she's probably the best girl in the division, best woman in the division. She probably is the uncrowned champ. So the whole Raquel Pennington, title fight and title reign currently is kind of like, what is this anyway? Again, no disrespect to Raquel Pennington, but I do believe Juliana Pena beats her, and I do believe Kayla Harrison then beats Juliana Pena. But I do not want to discredit Juliana Pena because it's one of those things where Juliana is a wrestler too. She's a grappler too, and her striking is more relentless than Kayla. But I do feel like the reason I'm saying Kayla wins that fight is because I think Juliana would be more open and willing to engage in some grappling. I think she'd have to use her jiu-jitsu more than anything to kind of keep Kayla at bay and like put her in positions when she's on the ground that she doesn't feel comfortable in, so that she moves and isn't just like sticking with the dominant kind of top position that Kayla is looking for. So anyway, I digress. That was me kind of projecting ahead a little bit, but yeah, Kayla dominated. Amanda Nunes might come back if Kayla gets the belt. You never know. I think Juliana Pena getting the belt could potentially bring Amanda back as well, but I think ultimately it's going to need to be Kayla because that's the fight that everyone's talked about forever. Hey, if Kayla gets a couple wins, beats girls bad, and then Amanda comes out of retirement and Kayla beats her, maybe Kayla's the GOAT now. So it's very interesting to see how that plays out, but we'll have to wait and see. So shout out to Kayla for that win. Aljamain Sterling versus Calvin Kattar. Again, I already talked about it a little bit, but you see here, man, 30-27 across the board. Totally agree with that. 10 minutes and 43 seconds of control time for Aljo. 8 takedowns over a 3-round fight. 15 minutes. He had 10 minutes and 43 seconds of control. That's very, very dominant. And he landed more strikes too. I mean, obviously a lot of those had to do with him, grappling Calvin Kattar and being in dominant positions on the ground. But still, I mean, 39 significant strikes to 8. More accurate. I mean, Calvin couldn't do anything. I'm sure he's been very, I'm sure he feels disappointed in his performance. I'm sure he wishes he did better, especially on that stage. But ultimately, this is probably, like I said, how it should have played out. Aljo is a championship, an all-time great champion, if you really think about it, especially for his weight class and bantamweight. All-time great champion, and Calvin has never even fought for a belt. So very good featherweight, but there's levels to it, as I mentioned. So moving on from there, featured prelim. Again, this is a fight that should have been on the freaking main card. It would have made the main card even better, honestly. Bo Nichols' fight was what I'll get to in a second, was the most forgettable fight probably of the entire card. I mean, maybe, but honestly, besides Kayla and Holly, because that one was just weird, I guess, a little bit, but still entertaining, and Kayla was dominant. So I don't want to go back 2 fights to that one. But anyway, Yuri, I understand why they put fights like this as the featured prelim. If you're watching, on ESPN, or you're watching these fights, these are the free ones, right? The prelims, sometimes they'll put them on ESPN. Sometimes they'll put them on ESPN Plus for free with your subscription to ESPN Plus. But then the pay-per-views you got to pay for, right? So how do you get people to stick around and stay watching fights and buy the pay-per-view? Maybe they weren't even thinking about buying the pay-per-view. They're like, hey, there's fights on, I'll watch it. It's free. Once it gets to the pay-per-view part, I'll move on to something else, or I'll go to sleep because it's 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock, whatever time it is when these fights start. But they put fights like this on the featured prelim or the last prelim of the night because they want people to get excited for the main card. Like, oh man, if this is what's happening before the main card even starts, like, holy shit, this must mean that the main card's worth me paying the money for the pay-per-view. So I get it. This fight was very exciting. Yuri Prochazka recently lost that fight against Alex Pereira for the belt, for the light heavyweight belt. Former light heavyweight champion. Rakic has been like a top 5 guy for a while now. He's had some injuries. This is a great matchup for him, or a great, name for him to finally get. And man, Rakic looked really good in this fight. He started out rocking Yuri. Yuri's really, honestly, at the end of the day, like, that's what Yuri does. He has a great chin, eats shots well, keeps moving forward. He hits guys harder than they hit him. I mean, pretty much. He's got a very unorthodox style. He can take the damage. He can grapple when he needs to. He can, he's got skills for sure. I really love the way he strikes, but his defense is questionable and he gets hit sometimes. And that's what happened here. He was getting legs chopped by Alexander Rakic the same way that Alex Pereira was chopping his legs. And Alexander Rakic is a better grappler than Yuri probably than Alex. So, it's one of those things where Yuri wasn't like getting his legs chopped by Alex. Excuse me, I gotta get these names right because I'm talking about 2 Alexes here. But Yuri against Pereira, against Poatan, got his legs chopped down that first round, ended up starting to grapple a little bit, kind of got top position and was trying to wrestle with Alex or with Poatan. And then with Rakic, he didn't try that because at the end of the day, like, Rakic is a strong grappler. He's got huge legs, big strong body, bigger for sure than Yuri. And it wasn't the right idea. So Yuri just kind of weathers the storm. He's getting rocked a little bit, but he's also doing well fighting back. And then ultimately he just landed the bigger shots that in the second round put Rakic in a position where he was hurt, where he was kind of losing his equilibrium. Rakic was still firing back for sure. Dude, Rakic hit Yuri with some really hard shots that even like buckled his knees for a split second, but Yuri just like he just recovers so quickly. And another reason why it was so impressive that Poatan knocked him out, but also another reason why you might question whether or not that fight kept going, the Poatan fight. Maybe Yuri recovers and maybe he wins, who knows. But not a bad stoppage, a little bit early in that fight, but anyway, I digress. So this fight, Yuri ends up, again, like I said, rocking Rakic, hitting him very hard in that second round, kind of turning him around and just being relentless, following him over and over again. It's one of those things where Rakic was never out really completely cold, but he was in a lot of, he was hurt for sure. I'm sure he was very dazed, not really totally in control of his body. So Yuri's, punching him and tossing him around a little bit, and they end up in some grappling situations as well, where Yuri, again, even though Rakic is the stronger grappler, he's super hurt, and Yuri is, just kind of rolling with it, flowing with it, staying on top, landing more shots, landing more strikes. Eventually, ground and pound, wins the fight by TKO in that way. So Yuri, I'd love for him to see. I love to see. Jamal Hill is already scheduled to fight Khalil Roundtree in his next fight, so that's not going to happen against Yuri. But I hope Yuri gets. Man, actually, I'm really curious. Let me see if I can figure out what was that. What was that? UFC rankings. I'm gonna look up these rankings here because I'm very curious actually, like what would be a viable fight for Yuri. Light heavyweight, Alex Pereira. Yeah, so like Magomed Ankalaev is most likely going to be the next matchup for Alex. So that's why Yuri probably won't fight him. Jamal Hill's fighting Khalil Roundtree. Okay, so there's like I guess Yuri again. Everything's fighting backwards because he's the number one contender, and I guess this is actually after Jamal Hill lost. So I think Jamal Hill was number one, Yuri was number two, and that Ankalaev was number three. Going and yeah, excuse me, and Rakic was four going into that UFC 300. Since those losses by Rakic and Jamal Hill, Jamal is down to three, Rakic down to five, Jan Blachowicz is up to four, and Ankalaev's up to two, and then Yuri's up to one, back from two. So if Yuri's number one right now, and then just beat Rakic, Jamal Hill is scheduled against Khalil Roundtree, Ankalaev's probably next for Pereira. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they did Yuri versus Alex again. It was a great fight. But, in terms of what makes the most sense, I think it's Ankalaev. But yeah, I guess maybe Yuri could fight Krylov or Johnny Walker or something like that. But honestly, he could also just wait and just see who, wins the Jamal Hill fight against Roundtree or see who wins the Ankalaev Pereira fight. So I'm not totally sure. Yuri has talked about fighting at 185. You see here in this image as well, Dricus du Plessis, the 185-pound middleweight champion, said that he went to the UFC Performance Institute, saw what Yuri's walking around weight was, and apparently Dricus walks around at a heavier weight than Yuri does, which is crazy. I think Dricus is like 6 foot, 6'1", maybe 6'2" tops. Yuri's like 6'2", 6'3". Definitely a taller 6'3" than Dricus is 6'2". It's not like they're the same height. I think it's very clear that Yuri's taller. And Yuri's got very long arms and big muscular arms. I guess his Dricus is like a big, thick torso and thick legs and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, okay, so Yuri, what are you walking around at like 220? And Dricus, you walk around at like what, 225 or something? Like, again, that means that Dricus is a weight bully a little bit. But Yuri's talked about going down to middleweight even to fight for a belt, which would be very fascinating because as long as he doesn't lose his chin, right? Because I think Alex Pereira, Poatan, the champ, to me, part of the reason he got knocked out so badly by Israel Adesanya in their MMA rematch was because he's depleting himself. I mean, he was cutting so much weight. I think he weighed like 235, 240, something like that. Definitely at least 230. He was 232 the morning of the fights on UFC 300, so he had to be at least 232, 235 in the cage. If he's at 235 and he's cutting to 185, and he's losing the chin that he might have now, the kind of ability to take shots that he has now at light heavyweight, I wonder if Yuri, which for him that might be his best attribute in many ways, is that something that he loses at 185 and then ends up losing the fights. I don't know, but if Yuri can maintain the chin, I think he goes to 185 and just destroys everybody, honestly, because they don't hit harder than some of these light heavyweights do, and Yuri hits hard as hell. So I feel like that would be a scary sight for the 185ers, just like Alex was, just like Poatan was. So we'll find out. We'll see. But yeah, moving on from that fight, great fight by Yuri, very, very big highlight win. He wants that rematch against Alex for sure. So first fight of the night on the main card, Bo Nickel, Cody Brundage. Bo Nickel was like a minus 2,000 favorite or something so ridiculous. He was like the biggest favorite ever or something like that. And again, Brundage, and that's why this fight was so stupid because I think we all were like, you know what, Bo's either going to destroy this guy and it's just a dumb matchup, or it's going to be like he doesn't destroy him the way he should and everyone's questioning Bo Nickel's level and whether or not he's going to be a star or whatever. So I think this is definitely more of the latter, where Bo Nickel was like trying to impose the wrestling I mentioned earlier. With Cody Garbrandt, you can come from a wrestling background, and Bo Nickel's like as the peak of wrestling background. I mean, he Penn State, multiple time national champion, one of the greatest collegiate wrestlers of all time, and the best collegiate wrestler from his class for sure. USA Olympic level wrestler. And yes, he's got a good submission game too. He's had some nice grappling, showcases where he has, choked guys out in ways where, like, you know what, this guy clearly works on his jiu-jitsu. He's not just a wrestler, right? He's not just coming in here and trying to wrestle guys. And he's been striking too. His striking looks a lot better than, you would expect a guy who might come in just being like, you know what, I'm going to be a dominant wrestler and that's it. He clearly wants to be well-rounded and demonstrate other skills. And 7 minutes and 25 seconds of control time in a fight that didn't even go 9 minutes, again, is a lot of control. But watching the fights, the way he was shooting for takedowns, the way that he was trying to kind of impose the wrestling at times looked a little bit sloppy for MMA, because it's not, he was going in as if it was like a wrestling match. Wrestling matches are not the same as MMA. You try to do one thing in wrestling that might work in a regular wrestling match with wrestling rules, and try to do it in MMA, they could sidestep you or kick you or elbow you or do something that's completely, out of the realm of imagination in a wrestling match, or out of the rule set even, and then make you look stupid. So I feel like Bo, he went for one takedown that wasn't the best at one point, and Cody literally just like tossed him off of him. And it was like, again, it wasn't, to the average person, maybe it's not a highlight in MMA. It wasn't like he got punched. It wasn't like he got kneed. It wasn't like he got taken down. It was really not even a move. It was nothing that you would even describe as like, he did this. He punched him. He kicked him. You wouldn't say that. You would just describe the scene you saw, which is Bo going for a takedown, grabbing Cody getting some leverage with an underhook, or an overhook. I forget how he kind of grabbed him, and just like turning him and hip tossing him like he was a little kid. I mean, it literally looked like it was an embarrassing kind of moment. I feel like Bo, even in that moment, kind of was a little bit like shocked by just the way, startled in some ways by how that happened to him. But ultimately, Bo gets him down again. Cody was getting out of the grappling exchanges. He was striking a little bit. You see the total strikes, 33 to 45, 4 to 8. Like, not a ton, but Cody was, he was there in the fight. And the way I heard someone talk about it, I think it was like Kamaru Usman or somebody like that, talk about this fight, was that, yeah, Bo fought somebody that could wrestle a little bit and could strike a little bit, and this is kind of what happened, right? So it's the first time you fight somebody that's like not bad at everything almost, or someone that is even decent at some things, and he still wins, by finish in the second round. So you got to give him props for that. But anyone talking about him fighting Khamzat Chimaev right now, I mean, no shot. I do not. Bo thinks that he could do it now, probably. But I feel like the way he was talking about himself after the fight was not quite the same energy he was bringing before the fight. I think he's way more like, oh, I'm only 6 fights in. Like, what were these guys doing 6 fights in their MMA careers? Not even let alone UFC careers, right? Like, Bo Nickal has 6-0 in MMA, period. So and he only started training MMA like before that. So I do understand what he means, and I agree with him. Like, if you give him the same, same experience level, or put him in with somebody who has the same experience level as him, he's going to dominate them. And if maybe he gets to that point one day where he has a lot of experience and he fights somebody, who's also got the same experience as him at that time, he might be that much better than them, when they're on the same playing field. But ultimately right now, the MMA wrestling, MMA grappling of Khamzat Chimaev is better than Bo Nickal. Bo Nickal is a great wrestler, but it has not fully translated yet. And again, I think his striking has not been fully tested yet. Until you see somebody get hit hard by a legit guy who can strike, and then see how they respond or how they strike back, then you can't really say for sure how they'll look, against the higher level competition. So good win for Bo Nickal, but the reason that no one wanted it on, everyone was like, why is this on the card, is because of just the high level fights that were before this. I mean, so many champions, so many like more experienced fan favorite people that fought before this Bo Nickal fight. And Bo will be a star. He is charismatic. He is, somebody that's a great athlete that we do want to see, improve and advance in the game. But this is, why that fight was looked at the way it was. Moving on, Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan. Very high level fight, split decision. I think I think a split decision is reasonable. Watching the fight live, I mean, Arman was so close to getting choked out in the first round and in the third round. And Charles did some damage, from different positions in those rounds as well. I think Arman struck better throughout the fight on the feet, mostly because he was able to. Excuse me, I shouldn't say he struck better on the feet. He looked better on the feet because he was able to avoid some of the striking of Charles while also striking him, as well. He wasn't just, going for takedowns the whole fight, but he was able to impose the wrestling on Charles against the cage, in different sequences. Charles wasn't like immediately getting taken down or anything, but that was preventing him from maybe getting off on his offensive game plan the way he wanted to. Charles from his back is very dangerous. He was definitely landing some good strikes from his back. I think ultimately everybody gave Charles the first round, and then one judge gave Charles the third round as well. Man, in the third round, I thought Arman was going to sleep in the third round. I thought he was asleep at one point in the third round because Charles had such a tight choke on him, and honestly, he had the choke for a solid like minute. It seemed like at the end of at the end of that round. So it's one of those things where watching that round, it was a competitive round. I thought Arman had the edge with control and with positioning in the third round. He landed some more strikes, but Charles was still fighting back, still striking, still seemed like he was there. And so Arman was definitely winning that round, but then he gets caught in that Darce choke where he's just surviving for like a minute. And while watching it until the fight ended and the bell and the bell rang and Charles let go of the choke, it wasn't even clear if Arman was conscious or not. So and then he ends up getting up, he's completely fine, and he was not like out and then came to or anything. It wasn't like that. So again, I think that third round was the swing round. It just depends how you look at it. I'm not mad at Arman getting the decision, but it is just sad to see Charles lose because Charles is such a fan favorite. And it's one of those things where it's like, even when he's losing a fight, you're like, man, did he win? That's how it is. I mean, he's getting knocked down in other fights. He's getting, put in bad positions, hurt in other fights, and ends up knocking those guys out or choking those guys out, later on in the fight. This is one of those same Charles Oliveira fights where it's like he's like losing probably, but he has these moments where you're like, man, that's dangerous. Man, at any second, this guy could just put you in a position where you're going to lose your consciousness. And that's what it was with this fight. But yeah, shout out to Arman. I'm glad he's going to now get an opportunity. He turned down an opportunity to fight Islam Makhachev in a few months in the summer, or in a couple months maybe in the summer, because it's a little bit short notice. And he's like, you know what? I already fought Islam on short notice in my debut. Of course, Islam wants me to fight him on short notice again. I'm not going to give him that opportunity. And I agree. Get a full camp. Sometimes Michael Chandler came out and said like he would have taken the fight, taking that title fight opportunity because you never know when you'll get another one. MMA moves quickly. You got to take your chances when you can. I understand that. But again, the same logic can be used to say MMA moves quickly. You might only get one shot. And if your one shot is, against somebody that's as good as Islam, you want to make sure you're prepared for it and that you are not giving him advantages that, he could use against you. So I'm cool with Arman waiting. I think it's a little bit weird that, Islam's going to be fighting Dustin Poirier, who got knocked out by Justin Gaethje, but then he knocked out an up-and-coming guy who was like ranked, top 15, and now he's getting a title shot. But it's just, again, it's because who's available and the weirdness of the UFC bookings, because they wanted to book this next fight, Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. I mean, again, Justin Gaethje was his last fight before this was him knocking out Poirier. He was in line for the fight against Islam. He could have probably waited and just fought Islam, but he ends up taking this fight against Max Holloway, who's moving up a weight class. And a lot of people thought that Max was going to get hurt in this fight. I was very 50-50 on this fight as to who was going to get the win. I thought that Justin Gaethje might just have that power and strength and size just to hurt Max in ways that he hasn't been hurt before, or similar to how Dustin Poirier hurt him. It could be like that. But I also thought, hey, Max could, I think he's a little bit better of a boxer and a little bit more technical and a little bit more defensively sound as well, even though he's known for taking shots. And I think he's better at avoiding them as well than Justin is. And I thought Max might put the volume on him and might end up getting the win. Then you see Max's physique as he's kind of preparing for these fights, definitely bulked up a little bit for these fights more properly. When he fought Dustin Poirier, he probably just ate more and got a little bit, chubby compared to his 145-pound self. This one, he was in the weight room. He was lifting weights, doing work. And the strength and power showed in this fight. The confidence showed in this fight. I mean, he looked confident as hell. Honestly, Max has looked better and better in all of his fights, man. I'm a huge Max Holloway fan. I always have been, even though he kind of has... his opponents have been guys that I've loved, more than him at times. Like I was a huge Conor McGregor fan coming up, huge Jose Aldo fan, and then I was a Volkanovski fan too, but not necessarily over Max, but just at the end of the day, like there have been moments where you have to kind of pick and choose, and it's hard to with Max because, again, even those guys, I'm like, man, Max is just that dude. He's so cool. He's such a – honestly, I saw my friend the other day. I'm like, Max might not be my favorite fighter of all time, but he might be my favorite person that's a fighter of all time. So it's like he just talks the talk of a tough guy, but also a compassionate guy and a friend, and just like that Max blessed Holloway Hawaiian spirit. I mean, he is just a great dude. Anyway, I'm gushing about Max Holloway, but – man, this fight was very entertaining. First round was competitive. I thought Max was winning the round, but it was close, and Justin Gaethje was kind of like looking like he was starting to maybe try to take more chances and throw some more bombs. Max then throws a beautiful spinning back kick, lands his heel on Justin's nose, breaks his nose, and the rest of the fight, Justin, couldn't breathe, great through that nose. I will say that I've seen guys get their nose broken in fights before, and people are a little bit like usually not giving them a ton of leeway with that. It's like, his, the nose is compromised now. It's hard to breathe. They'll talk about it in the fight and say that somebody's struggling with a broken nose. But with Justin, they were just like, oh yeah, he wasn't the same the rest of the fight. He wasn't the same the rest of the fight. And I'm like, all right, everyone else thinks that's their nose broken. We act like could happen in a fight. So why are we acting like it's like a what if situation? Like, what if this didn't happen? Yes, true. The breathing is compromised. It affects you. I get it. No issues there with that analysis. But I do feel like there was a little bit of a talking point of that broken nose that I didn't love, making it seem like, oh, who knows what would have happened if that didn't happen. It's like, no, Max was looking great in that fight. He threw that spinning back kick because of how Justin ducks his head when he comes in, and he would have landed it again. And he landed it many times throughout the rest of the fight, not on the nose exactly, but Max was landing that strike. Max looked big and strong. He looked powerful with his punches. Gaethje was taking the punishment for sure, but Max looked strong too, right? So competitive. Every round was competitive, right? It was competitive. Justin landed some shots, but Max was able to get in and get out in ways that Justin couldn't handle as much, and Justin was getting frustrated at times. And I think, again, it turned into a situation where Justin probably did need to turn it into a brawl, like a true brawl, to have a chance. Lost the first round, lost the second round, lost the third round. Fourth round ends up knocking Max down, which was not, you see on the screen here, again, Max is credited with one knockdown, but Justin didn't get one. Even since then, Max has come out and said, yes, it was a knockdown. Like, I got punched in the temple and fell and got back up right away, but clearly he got knocked down. It is what it is. On paper, Max has no knockdowns, against him still, whatever. But look at the strikes here. Max had 181 out of 309. Gaethje, 103 out of 199. So Max more volume. Hit the head, 62 to 44, 62 to 26 for the body shots, then 57 to 33 for the legs. That being said, not all leg strikes are created equal. Justin Gaethje has nasty leg kicks. He was definitely hurting Max's leg. Max's leg looked really brutalized at the end of the fight. But we've seen that before with him, where you're like, they're just guys like him, and Yuri Prohashka, Yoel Romero. I mean, some guys just get hit in the leg, chopped in the calf, and they might have moments of like, I can't barely put weight on this. I have to switch stances. But they just end up switching back to their normal stance and just moving forward and just taking more punishment, and maybe it hurts more throughout the fight, but they don't really let it show. So that's kind of how Max was here. Didn't really let the leg kicks show in terms of how he approached each moment of the fight, and was able to kind of, to weather the storm of that knockdown, which ended up, losing him the fourth round. I think it would have been, 4-1 if they went to the cards, because I do think he was winning the fifth round as well. But man, fifth round, again, Max is coasting at this point, and Justin Gaethje throws like a rolling thunder, strike where he kind of like does a front flip and tries to land his heel on the back of somebody's head. I've seen him do that before. Again, a really rare punch or strike to land, but when it does, you could knock somebody out. I've seen that before as well, in other promotions. But there's 15 seconds left in the fight, 10 seconds left in the fight. Gaethje does that. Max kind of avoids it, goes back to the center of the octagon. He could just walk around, avoid getting hit. Fight will be over. He'll get the win, right? After a great fight. It might have still been fight of the night, even if it didn't end the way it did. But Max Holloway, which he's done in other fights before, points to the ground right in front of him and says, 10 toes down. We're not moving from this spot, right? We're standing in the middle and we're throwing punches until the fight ends or until someone gets knocked out. And that's exactly what happened. Literally with 2 seconds left, Max lands an overhand right amidst this chaos and flurry of punches from both fighters. And then with 1 second left, Gaethje melts face first into the canvas. One of the craziest knockouts of all time, maybe the craziest moment in UFC history. I'm definitely somebody who's more on the side of okay, this is a little bit recency bias, right? Max is a huge star. Gaethje's a huge star. The build up to this fight and the anticipation of what the fight would be like was a big part of why the moment was so great. Two guys that stay in the middle. You think that if anyone does that with Gaethje, that Gaethje's going to be the one who comes out conscious, right? You assume that Max doing that is a bad idea. I was watching, talking to my friend on the phone, watching it, and I'm out loud saying, and he was actually a little bit behind me, his stream, so I was trying not to ruin what was happening, but I was just like, no, When Max pointed to the ground, I was like, no, like, what are you doing? Like, you're gonna win the fight. Like, why would you give him a chance to knock you out? This is his only chance of winning right now, and he's the one that probably has the edge in this situation. And again, I'm not the only one who thought that, but that's why it was so great. Everyone, all the reactions online of people watching this moment, they're like, oh man, they're clapping, they're yelling, they're laughing, they're excited, like, oh my goodness, look at what they're doing. They're throwing all these guys. That's what we expected, right? We expected these guys to throw punches till the end. And then as soon as Max lands that knockout punch, everyone's excitement just goes to like, holy shit, or like shock or horror or even more excitement, right? There's a whole nother level to it when Max gets the knockout. And then Max, afterwards is just like screaming, like, pumping his chest, flexing his muscles, like such a cool moment. I don't know if it's the greatest knockout of all time. Again, I think there's so much behind it, like who those two fighters were, the context of UFC 300, the context of like that Max was giving Gaethje the chance in the situation. Max came out and said, he said, hey, if roles were reversed and I was losing that fight, I know Gaethje would have given me those 10 seconds to try to win it. And I'm like, okay, fuck yeah, that is just some baller shit to say. That is so cool. So again, there's so many cool things about it, and they make it maybe the best knockout ever. And I would not be mad at anybody for saying it was, but at the same time, Yair Rodriguez throwing a backwards up elbow in a fight that he was losing to win the fight with 1 second left against another guy, Korean Zombie, who was rarely getting knocked out back then. That's like, the technique was crazy as hell. The moment was crazy as hell. The fight was a great fight, and the guy was losing, and it was desperation, but also a crazy technique that we've never seen before and might never see again. Joaquin Buckley, Taekwondo, throws the body kick, gets caught, does the spinning Taekwondo back kick to knock out Impa Kasanganay, out cold. Like, I mean, there's other Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo. Again, that's one for me that's probably still the best ever, because the buildup of that was insane, and these are the two like best fighters in the world. You think, right? But at the time, Jose Aldo was number one for pound. People were like, is Conor the real deal or not? Because he hasn't fought Aldo yet, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, 13 seconds clean, out cold, like shocking the whole world. So, and then continuing the rise, throwing freaking gasoline on the fire of the rise of Conor McGregor. So for me, that's probably still better. But man, this was so cool, such a great fight, and big shout out to both guys. But yeah, Gaethje now loses his title chance. He's gonna have to recover for like 6 months, not fight. That was probably his last title shot, opportunity, and now he's gonna have to beat one or two really good lightweights in a really tough division to get another chance. So crazy, all the stakes that was on the line in this fight. Max Holloway, again, he's probably next in line unless Volkanovski gets his rematch right away for Ilia Topuria for the featherweight belt. But now he's, I think he's ranked number 9. I'll actually check the rankings real quick. I think he's ranked number 9 in the lightweight division, even though he just beat the number like 1 guy. Where's it at? Yeah, Max Holloway's number 9, and he just beat the number 3 guy, who was, I think, number 2 actually, behind Charles Oliveira, who was number 1, and now Arman's number 1, Charles number 2. So yeah, it's like, Max is basically a top 5, if not top 2 lightweight also. So yeah, all the possibilities now are crazy. Other than the fact that Islam is already booked to fight Dustin Poirier, Max could fight Islam, Max could fight Ilya. Like, there's a lot of consequences for that fight and what happened. But yeah, great fight. Adrenaline dump for sure. Dana White talked about it. Everyone in the arena after that fight was like, holy shit, like, we don't have any energy right now. We just experienced like the craziest excitement ever. So the kind of buzz and the energy in the arena wasn't as great for this women's strawweight title fight, but it was a great fight. Zhang Weili, on paper, again, this is what I say, like, on paper, she won 49-45, 49-45, 49-45, which means that she had a 10-8 round in there, and she lost 1 round. So yeah, lost 1 round, but won 4 rounds, one of them dominantly. Dominant win, right? She had 256 total strikes compared to 73, 106 significant strikes compared to 43. I mean, 84 to the head compared to 21, 13 to the body compared to 14, 9 to the legs compared to 18. Yan Xiaonan did land some leg strikes, we see here. But 12 minutes and 44 seconds of control versus 2 minutes and 20 seconds of control. 6 takedowns versus 3. 2 submission attempts versus 0. Yan Xiaonan did have the 1 knockdown in the fight. It's not super clear, though, whether or not it was a clean knockdown. It was a clean punch for sure. She landed some clean strikes. But Zhang Weili sometimes throws kicks in a way that puts her off balance. And there was a couple times that she got a hit and kind of fell when that happened. One of them was a knockdown. One of them was not. But yeah, Zhang Weili first round, I mean, holy shit. She choked Yan Xiaonan out cold, like literally had her back, strangled her. Yao Xiaonan stops fighting the hands. When the round ends, Zhang Weili is pushing the limp out cold body of Yan Xiaonan off of her. But as she's doing that and kind of falling down, she's like coming to again, and the ref is like going in there to see what's up. Yan stands up, walks back to her corner, and the fight continues. And again, it is what it is. Like the fight continued. Zhang ended up getting the win. But man, this fight could have been stopped twice before the third round started. I mean, the second round, Zhang Weili was on Yan Xiaonan's back, mounting her, punching her. One of the reasons that she had, 100 freaking 80 more significant total strikes and like 60 more significant strikes against Yan Xiaonan is because of that second round. She was beating the crap out of her, and I am not mad. I'm not over here being like, it should have been stopped. It should have been stopped. In the moment, I'm like, it probably should be stopped. Like, that's kind of how I was thinking. But Yan still had a ton of energy left after getting beat up. I mean, on some level, I think Zhang Weili wasted more energy beating her up in those first two rounds. Ended up losing the third round and bouncing back in the fourth, the dominant round, and then another just kind of like cruising, grappling round in the fifth. Man, Yan showed crazy heart to get choked out, continue to fight, get choked out, and beat up the way she did in those two rounds, then win that third round. Is pretty freaking impressive. Zhang Weili was like shaking out her arms. I mean, she was just so tired, or excuse me, not tired, but so like blown up, or like when you're doing like weight training, you're doing like any sort of cardio or any sort of exercise, and you go super hard for a super long time, your muscles are going to get tight and swollen and filled with oxygen, filled with blood, in a way that makes them look hard to use. You got to shake them out, right? Shake the arms out. And Zhang Weili's arms, she was shaking out her arms and her legs in that third round. It was crazy. And again, I do realize, someone explained it that like, if you get knocked, like rocked really badly, like by a punch or a kick or a strike or something in a round, and then you're like wobbled and it looks like, hey, you might be out cold if they let it continue for another second, but then you're wobbling back to your corner. As long as you're not like stumbling super, super badly, if you're just like kind of getting your bearings together and getting back to the corner and trying to recover, that's okay. But if you're like stumbling and falling down and don't know where you're going, that's when they'll stop a fight in between the rounds and be like, you know what? They got rocked at the end of the round, but I'm stopping it now because they're clearly not there. So I think the referee was Jason Herzog. He saw Yan Xiaonan after she gets choked out. She came to pretty much right away, once Weili let go of her. So I understand the discretion that Herzog was operating under. I understand he was kind of looking to see if Yan, one big stumble or one big fall or one big like I have no idea where I am moment, and I think that he would have stopped the fight, but Yan held it together. And to be fair to her, after the fight, she said the same thing. She was like, yeah, like I must have went out right when the bell rang, came back to, and I tried to like show him that I'm still here, I'm still okay. So I'm not mad that it didn't get stopped there. I am surprised it didn't get stopped, but I'm not mad about it. Second round, I guess again, I'm not mad that it wasn't stopped, and I'm not that surprised either. I feel like you could have stopped at any point, but every time it could have been stopped or was about to be on the brink of being stopped, I feel like Yan just either did something with her arms or her body to avoid the strikes a little bit, or to avoid getting hurt, or to avoid them landing cleanly. So it wasn't, she was still in the fight. So again, I'm fine with how it played out. Very exciting, very just a high level fight, man. It was a really, really good fight. And everyone talks about it this way. They're all like, hey, it was a really good fight, but it just happened to be after Max Holloway and happened to be right before Alex Pereira. So anyway, moving on from that, last fight, and then I'll kind of end this episode. But yeah, Poatan, man, go look it up if you haven't seen it. It's a good fight. Jamal Hill talked about knocking him out, right? Talked about coming out and finishing Alex Pereira, knocking him out cold. The build up to the fight was getting more and more intense as we got closer. And honestly, I other people thought this as well. I thought Jamal Hill was going to come out like gangbusters, maybe not like recklessly right away, but I thought that he was going to be trying to impose a brawl, try to put a situation there where Alex is not just in a kickboxing sort of fight, where he's kind of being, walked down, or the pressure, he's on the back foot, Poatan is, and Jamal is throwing like more unorthodox strikes that Alex is less used to seeing, right? Like he's been a high-level kickboxer for a long time. If you fight against high-level kickboxers, their technique is going to be good and going to be, based on traditional technique. Jamal throws some looping, like overhand. Maybe Alex isn't ready for that. I was expecting that to be the approach and that to be the threat and the danger. Doing a technical kickboxing fight against Alex is like, yes, kill or be killed sometimes, it seems like with Alex, but really, hey, if he's subtly avoiding getting hit by like a half an inch and then he hits you, you might think, man, that was close. He almost was the one that got hit. He was almost the one that got knocked out. But he does it all the time. He's always subtly moving out of the way of punches and hitting guys. So it is what it is. That's how this fight ended up ending. They start out, both kind of like, so they're opposite stance fighters. Their lead legs are right in front of each other. They're both kicking the front legs. We've been seeing here on the stats here, Jamal Hill landed 2 more leg strikes. They threw the same amount. They both threw 9. Alex was 6 for 9. Jamal was 9 for 9. Body shots, Alex was 6 for 6. Jamal was 3 for 6. Then head strikes, which a lot of them came at the end with ground and pound, but 12 out of 15 for Alex and 1 out of 7 for Jamal. On the feet, standing up, this fight only lasted, a couple minutes, pretty much. They looked pretty good, right? They both looked like they were feeling each other out. Jamal looked solid. Like he landed one overhand that, Alex rolled with, but he landed one punch to the head right before Alex really got going. Alex whiffed on a few leg strikes, which usually he doesn't do. But at the same time, it seemed like just the energy, the body language of the fight, as it was progressing, Alex was starting to get his range. I think he was using those leg kicks to try to find the range with his body, because he doesn't need to punch you then to know that he can punch you. If he kicks you, he's been kickboxing for so long. If I know I can kick you from here, then I know where I need to go to punch you. So that's what Alex was doing. Again, he does this all the time. I mean, he's jabbing Jamal Hill to the chest to try to bring his, guard down a little bit to try to parry those chest punches so that he can wrap around with an overhand, with a hook. And that's what he did to Sean Strickland and to beat Sean Strickland. But ultimately, similar thing happened here. But the way it happened was a little bit unique. So Jamal Hill throws a body kick, hits the cup of Alex Pereira. Definitely one of those strikes that in the moment you're like, that probably isn't super damaging. You know what I mean? Alex is probably fine. If he wants to take a second, he can take a second. You never know with a cup strike. Like if it just, obviously if it hits you a certain way, a certain angle, doesn't even have to be a hard strike. It just hits you in the right spot in the cup and you could have some issues, right? Recovering. Alex got hit there. You could hear it on the TV, right? On the screen, on the broadcast, you could hear the sound of the cup getting hit. So it's a clear groin strike. Herb Deem. So Jamal Hill kind of pauses a little bit. Alex Pereira kind of pauses, like brushes his cup, but acts like he's not going to pause. But that little moment, Alex got a tiny bit closer to Jamal, because Jamal's guard was slightly down because he expecting a stoppage. Herb Deem even says, stop, 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 walks in to kind of like separate the fighters. Alex Pereira doesn't even look at Herb Deem, just turns with his hand, grabs Herb's wrist, and is like, no, like keep going. We're going to get, and then Herb's like, all right, whatever, continue. So it's a very quick moment. Some people want to say, well, officially he should have stopped the fight and separated them. I don't think that's a rule. Like you don't have to say timeout and then have to separate them. You can continue if the fighter wants to. And there's been many examples of fighters getting kicked in the nuts. The referee's like doesn't even say timeout. He might just be like, do you want to stop the fight? He might even ask the fighter. Like it's very, very flexible with how the fighters and the refs interact with the groin strikes when they're not blatant groin strikes. So this was totally normal as well. Jamal Hill, after the fight, I don't think he's necessarily like blatantly said, oh yeah, like Herb should have separated us and it wasn't fair that he didn't. He hasn't said that, but he has been like, yeah, I've seen people talk about that moment in the fight gave Alex the upper hand, and yeah, it probably did. But dude, you kicked him in the groin, like you kicked him in the cup, and then didn't have the wherewithal to be like, I need to really lock back in right now because he's still in my face. So I blame Jamal. Jamal should blame himself for that. I mean, dude, at the end of the day, like, feel threatened. That's the issue with these guys, right? They go against Alex and they don't feel as threatened as they should for some reason, even though he knocks people out cold. And this is what happens. So groin strike happens. Alex just like doesn't even look. He's like, no, go away. And Joe Rogan even said on the commentary, Joe Rogan's like, doing a little bit quote for Alex. He's like, go away. Let me kill this guy. I'm about to kill this guy. And as Joe Rogan is saying that, the other commentators, are John Anik and DC, are laughing about Joe's comment about the situation because it was just a funny, cool moment. Like, man, Alex is like, I don't worry about my nuts. I'm fine. I'm about to go to work. And as Joe says that, as John Anik's laughing, boom, Alex Pereira just lands that left hook that he was setting up with the parries. Jamal throws a straight left backhand that barely misses, but again, Alex knows what he's doing, right? He's avoiding those punches and he's landing when he wants to. And it was crazy. I mean, he landed like, they call it a shovel uppercut, punching a little bit from the side, but a little bit from up as well. It's not quite clean around the guard like a hook would be. It's not straight up like an uppercut. It's like the shovel uppercut that's kind of right in between. And he landed with like the bottom three fingers of his glove, of his knuckle. It wasn't even the big, blocky, knuckles, or the big part of your fist that you would think would be the most powerful, and it is the most powerful. And the thumb isn't hitting it. It was literally like the pinky finger and the ring finger, and maybe a little bit of the middle finger caught Jamal Hill on his mouth, eyes roll in the back of his head, thud to the ground, big heavy landing. Like clearly was not really bracing himself for that fall, but he wasn't out cold. Alex goes to the ground, hits him with some hammer fists. Jamal's equilibrium is completely off. He can't really control his body in that situation. Goes to sleep like kind of probably while being knocked out. Stands up like somewhat soon after, but no one's calling it an early stoppage at all. I think Jamal Hill, his comments since then have been like, yeah, I was coherent the whole time. It's like people are like, yeah, okay, bro, like stop acting like it was a close fight. Stop acting like you were on the brink of. He even said like, I want to continue to show what I was showing. Bro, what were you showing, man? Like, yes, you were showing that you can like stand with him for a few minutes and hit him in the legs, and maybe again, like, obviously he's a high level fighter, but you weren't like hurting him. You weren't imposing any game plan on him. You were the one getting walked down. You were the one that got knocked out. So there's really not much else to say. So Jamal just looks kind of bad from that, and he looks bad from all the shit he was talking before the fight. That's how it goes. So after the fight, Alex knocks him out, throws the Kabi baby. Like, is this all right? Is it that simple? Is it that easy? Like just that emote on him, and that's the end of that. So great, card overall, UFC 300. Really enjoyed it. I'm gonna, I'll figure out again. I want to show highlights. I know I've shown highlights on other episodes. I just have to make sure that I'm not showing too many or showing the wrong ones, because I don't want the videos to get taken down, or for me to have to take out sections of the episode. So, yeah, that's that. Next up for Alex Pereira, I mean, I'm thinking, Magomed Ankalaev at some point in the near future, on a future pay-per-view. Alex Pereira has 2 broken toes. He went into the fight with a broken toe, and then he broke another one in that fight. So another reason why Alex Pereira is a savage. We'll see what's next for him. I'm thinking Ankalaev maybe sometime at the end of the summer or in the fall. But we'll see how the rest of the fights that are coming up play out. Jamal Hill's already booked to fight Khalil Roundtree in June. So yeah, I'm sure that Alex will fight again. Honestly, I think probably in the summer at some point. But yeah, without further ado, that'll be the end of the episode. That's all my breakdown of UFC 300. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the MMA Full Throttle with Aristotle. Please subscribe to Aristotle MMA on YouTube. Please subscribe to Black Gritty on YouTube and Spotify, as well as Black Gritty on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all that stuff, TikTok. And again, Aristotle MMA, I'm also there on TikTok and Instagram. So thank you all again. I'll see you on the next episode.